Welcome to Women Entrepreneurs Radio with your host, Deborah Bailey. When I started this podcast in 2008, I was on a mission to promote women business owners, creatives, and entrepreneurs. In each episode, my guests provide resources, valuable tips, and inspiration. Women Entrepreneurs Radio is about showing women how to harness their natural strength to achieve success on their own terms. Hi everyone, this is Deborah, and I am back with another podcast. And as I mentioned, I was going to talk about direct sales for authors in this next podcast episode. So if you haven't listened to the first two, where I've talked about author podcasting and also about author blogging, those courses are part of my, what I call my branding, author branding bundle, which are 3 courses that I'm going to be offering on my new website, where I have uploaded some courses that I've been presenting over the past few years to authors, and they are in PDF format. I'm offering the most popular courses in that format where people can download them, and they can also use the forms, they're refillable forms in the PDF, so that you can take notes within the document, or you can print it out and take notes if you want to do it by hand. But in that way, you've got everything you need inside the document, and it's something you can keep and refer to with different examples and things about writing for fiction authors. For the most part, I have a couple of things up there now, writing the monster romance hero, and also I have second chance romance, and the other 2 that I mentioned, the blogging for authors and podcasting for authors. And these are classes, again, that I've given over the years to different writing groups and gotten good feedback for them, which is why you'll also find some testimonials on that website where you can check out the courses in more detail. So I'm going to be adding a link to that site in the show notes, and then you can go and check that out. So this is the 3rd course right now that's going to be part of the author branding. There may be a couple of others where I may talk about newsletters, because I think that's something people have a lot of questions about. But I'm not sure right now because I haven't given that course. But I may just put together something or just do a podcast about it for those people who may have an interest. So I'm also going to be presenting a webinar about direct sales. So that's something that's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks, and I will share a little bit more about that a bit later. So right now, I just want to get into it and kind of give you this overview about why I think direct sales are really becoming a big topic for authors right now. Not that they haven't always been, because in the past, when before authors really were doing a lot of self-publishing, if you will, indie publishing, there were people who were selling their books direct. So it's not like this is a brand new phenomenon. But at that time, a lot of people who did that were having to direct sales for authors aren't exactly a new thing. People have done it before. And a lot of people sell their books directly before indie publishing became a big thing. But one of the differences is that people had to have books printed, and they may have sold those books physically. So that may have meant putting out a lot of cash ahead of time to print out a certain number of books that you think that you might sell, and the printing costs and all that. So a lot of that was pretty prohibitive for people, I think, for the average person who would have been interested in publishing, self-publishing. And also, when I published my first nonfiction book, I found that the process compared to now had a lot more steps involved with formatting and even down to things that may seem simple today, like finding fonts and just kind of making sure that your book was put together in a certain way, design, the interior design, the cover design. A lot of those, I would say, people, contractors, designers who would do that kind of thing for the publishing industry, let's say, may not have been accessible to the person who wanted to publish their own book. Though now that's much different. You'll find people who will freelance for those industries, but also they will do work for the average, author who wants book covers designed and wants their interior, their book designed and such. It's much easier now to get that done by those same professionals, or to find new people who have come up through the ranks, you could say, and have taught themselves in a lot of cases how to use the software, and now they're out there and they're designing, getting these products out there for the indie publisher. So you don't necessarily have to go to that person who may be charging a lot more money because of their clientele, and that would be to be expected. But there are professionals who do that work. Of course, editors, developmental editors, proofreaders, that kind of thing, who may be a little bit more accessible to the average author. And, of course, print on demand also changed the game in a major way, that you didn't have to have a lot of books printed out and put them all over your house until you could sell them. So a lot of things changed, and, of course, the introduction of the Nook for Barnes & Noble, the Kindle for Amazon. A lot of things have happened over these past years that have changed the face of self-publishing, which now also is known as indie publishing. And of course, now you have people doing hybrid publishing who may have traditional contracts, but then they're also publishing themselves. So there's a lot of things that are much different than they were in the beginning. But I say all that to say that, yes, there were people who were doing that in the beginning as well. But it may have been a totally different way it was being done, a lot more steps, and probably much more expensive than right now. But presently, selling direct has become very attractive for authors. And for the most part, I'm going to be talking about fiction authors, though nonfiction authors, of course, also have their things that they can be doing and probably have been doing to sell their books. But I can also touch on that in a little bit. But as far as selling direct, I would say the advantages are you can now get your books printed off, print on demand. You don't necessarily have to have them printed ahead of time. So that helps with connecting that whole process, let's say, to when someone places an order on your site, and then you may be able to have a printer, kick off that process to print the book and send it to them, or just have it come to you if you're signing the books, but have it be at a lower price than it may have been otherwise. But importantly, there are things like higher profit margins, where if you were selling through, say, Amazon, you're paying a percentage to Amazon for selling your book. So right now it's 70-30, depending, of course, on how you priced your book. And they get 30%, you get 70%. But then you've also got to wait a couple months until you get paid. And if you have your book on Kindle Unlimited, then you're getting paid by some kind of weird calculation that I myself have never figured out, where it's calculating how much of the book the person is reading, where in the beginning it used to be if someone, in a sense, checked out the book, you could compare it to a library situation. If they checked out the book, then they would pay the price for the book because they're reading the book. But then it changed, of course, as everything does, and they started going by the calculation of how much they've read of the book. So you're only getting paid for that. That could be okay for some people, and it works for a lot of authors, or for others, and I found for myself it didn't really work. If you have shorter books particularly, it may not work, because you're not really getting paid in the way that maybe you might like because of the page count, or if someone checks something out and it's just kind of sitting there, or they might read a few pages and get back to it, and you're not getting paid for anything because they haven't read the whole thing, as opposed to if someone bought your book and they have it on their e-reader library and they get to it when they get to it, but they paid for it. In this case, it's like they're kind of renting it. So some authors do very well, okay, others don't. But if you are selling your book direct, you don't even have to deal with that situation. You have control over your pricing and your promotions. For instance, I have set up an online store for my books, and I put some of the books into a separate bundle that I don't have them bundled together on any of the other bookseller sites. I just have it done right there on my storefront. So anybody who accesses that is going to have access to a bundle that no one else is not being offered anywhere else. So that's an advantage. You can give readers something that they may not get anywhere else. And then you can set the price for that based on a price you may have to set. Let's say if you're offering this book bundle on one of the bookseller sites, you may have to set it up in a certain way because you're paying out money to the bookseller. You're paying out money to the distributor. I use Drafted Digital to distribute to Barnes & Noble and Apple and Kobo and all these other sites. Well, everybody's getting their piece of the pie, and then I'm getting the royalties at some point, months later. So you're not getting paid right away, and then you're also getting what's left after everybody else has gotten their share. So if you are selling direct, then right away you're getting more of the profits of the actual sale. And you can set your price accordingly because you're keeping more of the profits. So maybe you can now pass those savings on to your readers. Also, there's, as I mentioned, flexibility, the price as you see fit. You don't necessarily have to price it based on how much you're paying out to these other middlemen, you could say. You can base it on, well, this is what I think I like to charge for this particular book, or maybe this one I'm going to make it free right now. You can do that. You don't have to worry about, if I make it free here, to make it free there, because I believe that with Amazon, it was, at least, I believe it still is, they had to be the lowest priced, however you did it, if you have your book on other sites. So that's an issue. Where now, you have to make the price adjustments based on that idea that Amazon is supposed to be the lowest price one. So again, if you're just going to run a sale and now you've got to go and set that up on multiple sites, that's something you don't really have to do when you're selling it direct. And you can do it when you want to, as opposed to now I've got to plan ahead when I'm going to go on to Amazon and change the price and that kind of thing. Let's see. You have a direct relationship with readers because now you can interact with them as far as what they like, maybe bundles they may want to see, if you can see what books may sell more, then maybe you're going to do more promotions on those. Maybe you'll look into offering prequels or sequels or short stories that deal with that particular story world because you see that that's popular. Maybe you want to give a certain reward, if you will, to your readers, and I'm going to make this available to you at this reduced price, or maybe make it free if you're using that as a promotion for them to try other things in the series. It's really up to you at that point as to how you do that. You can also build your mailing list off of who's buying your book, because in that way you have this direct connection to that person who bought the book, and you can market to them, you can connect with them, you can say hi to them, you can find out what they like, what they don't like. It's that kind of thing, because if someone is buying your book from Apple or Kobo or something, chances are you don't know who this person is. If they don't leave a review, which most people do not, then they're just someone who's out there who may like your book, may not. But if they like it, and they may leave a review, they may not. They may tell their friends about it, but you may never know who this person is. But in this case, if they're buying directly from you, you can create a relationship with them. And that, I think, is always a positive in the long term. And you can always have them on your mailing list, which, again, I was talking about newsletters before. That's a positive if you can have them on your newsletter and you can market to them directly and let them know what else is coming up and interact with them on a regular basis. And that, again, leads to personalizing the customer experience. So based on these readers, and now you have this direct relationship with them. You don't have this other middleman between them and you. You can find out, as I said, what they like, what they don't like. Maybe if they want to see more of this or see more of that. Now you can really get your information directly from the reader. And I think that's a benefit, a major benefit. Now, of course, there's disadvantages. As always, there's going to be disadvantages to selling direct. And one of the big ones is you have more responsibility. You have responsibility is good. You have more responsibility. That can be bad as well. Because now you've got to manage these payment gateways, which is actually the e-commerce site, essentially. How they're getting paid, or rather how you're getting paid. Like, for instance, if I'm using at this time PayHip, which you can have a free option for PayHip, and then you can use a gateway, like say Stripe, which a lot of people use, or Square. I believe you can use that with them as well, or PayPal, which is very popular, which is what I use. So with PayPal, you can have your account, of course, and the money goes into your bank account. But then people don't have to have a PayPal account to use it. If they're paying by debit, credit, one of those two, then they can just have PayPal process it, essentially. But a catch with that is that if you're selling print books, now you're going to have to manage shipping. And, of course, there's things like sales tax that will have to be managed in some way. So, again, it's more responsibility on your end when you're taking this on. And you don't have to sell print. I'm not selling print books, so, not to discourage you. You can stick with ebooks and audiobooks or just ebooks. Some people also sell swag available, like shirts and cups and things like that. You can do all of that if you want to. But of course, if you're already selling those things, you may already have an idea of how to manage sales taxes and things. So that may not be as daunting as it would be for someone who's just starting out and has not really had experience with all of that. And of course, there's costs if you're selling rather, and mailing physical products is costs with that. Again, back to printing, if you're doing print books, if you're doing items that you're selling to people, those things would have to be printed as well. And of course, you're going to have to market and promote so that people can know your site exists. Because even people who like your books and read your books may not even know you have a site. So now you're going to have to make sure they find out about that, which again is an advantage of having a newsletter that people can find out when you're doing these new things. But again, now you're going to have to market to them to let them know, hey, I've got this site here, so maybe you'd like to come and check this out and buy directly from me. I was going to say users because I do tech writing. So I'm thinking in terms of users and users guides, but your customer may not know that you have a site. They may not know anything about that. So once you let them know that, then you're going to have to promote that, because a lot of your customers may prefer to buy from these other booksellers. Of course, that's understandable, but there are times when they may give you, an opportunity. They may have the opportunity rather to buy directly from you if there's some kind of a special thing going on, or a special sale, or a special bundle, or some book that they can't get anywhere else. That could be a major incentive for them to buy directly from you. And I'm just going to note really quick, in some cases, that's what people use when they do Kickstarters. Though doing the Kickstarter is outside the scope of the course that I presented. But often when people do Kickstarters, they'll offer some other special editions or something with a hardcover or some other thing that everybody can't access if they go to Amazon or whatever. It's something that you can only get through this Kickstarter. And they may give certain gifts, let's say, at certain levels based on your contribution. So again, that's a way that you can give something to the people who are interested in what you're writing that they may not get somewhere else. So again, that's a reason why people may want to buy from you in your store, because you're offering something that they may not be able to get anywhere else, and that's going to be an incentive for them. Now, I want to say about nonfiction is that there are additional options. And for the nonfiction author, a lot of times you can sell your book at a conference. If you're doing speaking, you could sell there. Any kind of an event, perhaps. If you connect with a book club, which fiction authors can as well, but nonfiction authors may be able to connect with book clubs. And if you are, for instance, selling a business book, if you can connect with any associations or groups that may be interested in that topic, or any other kind of organizations, then that's something that could really come in handy for you to also have copies of your book when you go to the event, whether it's incentive of signed copies or however you're going to manage that. There are different ways that you can do that. If you're coaching, you may offer that book as something your clients receive or can get at a discount, or however you want to do that. But that gives you some additional things that you can do as well to sell directly and build those relationships with your readers, because you may also be trying to build those same relationships with clients. Your reader may be your client or a potential client, so that's a way for you now to make those connections with them so they can work with you in various ways, or you can put yourself out there as an authority in your topic or a thought leader of some kind. So, there's some additional benefits to that. So let me see what else I want to cover about this. I think before I go into the other parts of the selling direct, I want to mention that on the 28th, it's a Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm doing a webinar, How Authors Can Sell Their Books Direct. And that is going to be, as I said, a webinar online. Don't have to go anywhere. You just have to get your computer or your mobile device. And I'm going to cover this, but of course, go into more detail of information that I had shared in this course when I presented it. And it's going to be very interesting to go a little bit more into the platforms, some of the top platforms that people are using out here to sell their books, things that you should keep in mind. I mentioned payment gateways and taxes, things like that you should be aware of. I'm also going to talk about one of the really big, I could say, success stories of a nonfiction author who made a really major sale of her first book on TikTok. And it really had nothing to do with Book Talk, if you may have heard of them. That was not a Book Talk production. It was something that she did, and the sales were enormous. I read about the article in the New York Times. It caught the attention of a lot of people and really was a way to sell our books direct, but maybe not a way that people were thinking about before. So I'm going to go into more detail about that when I have the webinar. So if you'd like to find out what those strategies were, and maybe that's something you may want to consider for your own book selling strategies, then definitely I hope you will join us. I'll put the link. It's a long link. I'll put it into the show notes. It's on, as I said, ticket will be sold through Eventbrite. So that way, that's an easier way for me to manage that than, trying to sell them myself directly. But Eventbrite will manage that for me and also kind of put it out there so more people can see it. So I hope you will consider checking that out. And listen, I'll share the link, and then you can click the link and get more information on there about the webinar. Again, it's called How Authors Can Sell Their Books Direct. And it's going to be $20, but I have a early bird discount on there, so it's around $18 for a certain amount of time, I believe until the 24th. And there is, let's see, you can cancel if you really want to about 3 days before the webinar. But of course, I hope you don't do that if you do register. I hope you will decide to join us. And the link for the login for the webinar is going to go out about 2 days before the webinar. So that way, then you'll get the link to log in. And for those people who may miss it for some reason after they've signed up, they're not able to come after all, then they're going to have access to the replay that they can catch it. It's not like they're going to miss it. And also there's going to be a download of a checklist to be followed, a suggested checklist to be followed when you're setting up your online storefront. Because there's several things to keep in mind and to make sure that you consider. So that checklist I thought was would be very helpful for people. So that's going to be given. And also, I have some information from the Blogging for Authors course about SEO and keywords, which are important when you're putting things online, obviously. So I'm also going to make that available so that authors can see these things that they need to consider when they're writing descriptions, or if they're promoting their store, promoting their books, then they can be mindful of these, SEO tips, so that they can make sure that they have a better chance of being found online. So as I said, that'll be in the show notes. So I will go on now with what I was talking about, payment gateways, which I don't want to go too much into that because it can seem overwhelming, and a lot of that's tied to the platforms that I'm going to be covering during the webinar. But again, as I was saying, PayPal would be an example of that. And that's pretty much something that is used internationally. Or if you have Stripe or Square, I believe Zelle or Zelly, however that's pronounced, would also be considered a gateway. It's just a way to process payments. Also, there's taxes to be considered. If people are selling internationally, and how's that paid, or say ebooks taxed in that place where your customer is or not, or there's all these stipulations. As we know, when it comes to taxes, there are many stipulations. So that's something else that you should keep in mind. But depending on the gateway, they may process those things, and really you wouldn't have to sit there and try to figure it out for every country or state. That's something that could be a part of the processing that happens. But again, it depends on what you choose, what gateways and what e-commerce platforms that you choose for your sales. So in one way, I don't want to gloss over it, but at the same time, since I'm going to mention it in the webinar, I don't really want to go into a lot of detail about it, because it can feel like it's super complicated. I think to some degree it is, and I'm not a tax professional, so I'm not going to sit here and say, well, do this, this, and this. So I'm definitely putting that disclaimer out there. But what I found in my research is that for the most part, these e-commerce platforms have a lot of documentation, and they will let you know what they manage and what they don't manage, and how these things can be taken care of, especially if you're selling e-products, e-books, audiobooks. How are those handled? How are print books handled? How, if you're selling swag, how might a shirt be handled, or a cup, or whatever? All those things would be handled differently. So definitely these platforms answer all the questions, and they have their suggestions as how to manage things like that. So I just want to put that out there, because that may not be something that we're thinking about necessarily until you're selling something. Because otherwise, if you're selling your books on Amazon, you're not sitting there thinking about how they processing taxes and things like that. You're just thinking about your royalties. How much are you going to make, and when are you going to get paid? So this may be yet something else to consider that you wouldn't have to think about otherwise. And as I said, as a author, you may feel, wow, this is one more thing I don't really want on my plate. But there are ways to deal with these things. There are e-commerce platforms that have their solutions. So it's not entirely that you have to do all these things yourself, or worry about all these different parts to the puzzle. And also with fees, again, these e-commerce platforms, some of them will charge you certain fees for certain services, for certain apps you may have to use with them. One of the reasons I picked PayHip was because I saw a couple other authors on it when I first started to look around and see what was going on with selling. And because they aren't charging, they do have a fee if you upgrade. but their fee is they have a transaction fee. So you're paying them more of a transaction fee if you have the free plan, let's say. So that for me was a trade-off because I didn't really want to have to pay them to put my books out there and stuff to start with. But once you make sales, then you may decide, I'd rather have this upgraded experience. Or you may want to go and use another platform altogether because you may find, I prefer this one or that one. And a lot of times if you want to move from one to the other, they will have instructions as to how to do that. Because, of course, they would love you to move. If you go to Shopify and they're like, you're coming from this place, so here are the instructions. They have no problem telling you how to move from one to the other. So that's probably the least of your issues if you decide as you go that you prefer to be on a different platform. So that is definitely not something to be as concerned about. But there are, in some cases, additional fees for different things that you have to do. So I think that's, again, something to consider. If you're publishing your own books and you may feel like, wow, I don't know if I really want to spend this additional money, it's quite understandable that you may feel like that's really not an investment that you want to make. Or maybe you just want to start really small at first to see how it goes. And then if you are setting up your sales forecasting, let's say, and you really want to get to a certain amount of sales you're making from your own site, then maybe at that point you may look at, if I'm making this much, then I can upgrade to something else. But again, that's something you really would have to look at and plan for to see if this is the right choice for you. Which is why I'm going to be sharing a few top e-commerce platforms, pros and cons, and then just to get an idea of what's out there. And they have, as I said, a lot of documentation, and they answer a lot of questions. So even if you were to go and after the webinar and want to check out something like Shopify, for instance, there's a lot of documentation there that you can find out more about getting set up. So, and that goes also with the payment gateways. They definitely have documentation. You will not be left not knowing how to set things up or how things integrate with each other. That I can definitely say. It's a lot of documentation out there. So that's a positive for you. And that's an interesting thing because years ago, there may not have been as much documentation to do a lot of these things. So then you were stuck trying to find out how to do this, how to do that, because it wasn't as common. I suppose that's why it wasn't really out there. But now it's much more commonplace. And now I feel it's much easier to get set up, at least, because you do have the documentation. Also, some of those e-commerce sites, I know Shopify has what they call Shopify partners, and they're professionals who could help you get set up. And also, I believe other sites as well have people who can walk an author through that or set it up for them. So it's not like you're ever going to be out there on your own. There is help out there, which is a positive. If this is something that you think that you may want to do, and hopefully it's even if you decide not to, even if you hear about what the options are, and you go, "Wow, that's nice, but I don't really want to take that on." Maybe it's something to put aside for later. But I think right now for authors who really want to know what is possible for them, I think it's a good thing to find out about. And then you can make your own decision as to what you think is best. And I think that was the most part what I wanted to say about that, because I didn't want to go too much into it because it is a huge topic. I think that's it. There's a lot that you can do, a lot of different options, a lot of different ways you can sell and connect with people, even if you just decide to do physical copies. I know a lot of people seem to be doing that on TikTok shops. From what I can see, it's it's very much selling physical copies of books. So a lot of authors who are selling on there are selling signed copies, let's say. So they'll say, well, they may be making videos or TikTok lives where they're sitting there packing books, or they're sitting there autographing books. And that kind of brings us back to the beginning. I was talking about people printing off physical copies. You may feel that that's really not what you want to do. Or other people may be great. I would love to have that control over how I'm sending my books out to people, and I can give them autographed books, or I want these books printed out because I go to conferences and book signings and things like that. So that may not be a negative at all for some people. Other people may not really want to take that on. But there's different ways that you can handle that. Yeah, you can do the physical copies, or you can do the e-copies. It's pretty much up to you. At this point, you don't have to do it one way or the other. I think that is what's giving authors right now a lot more options than they may have had in the past. So, as I said, it's not that people weren't selling directly before, because they were. But now it seems to be more of a topic than it was. And I think because there are so many e-commerce platforms and things, I think in a way it's easier for people. And of course, after COVID, where a lot of people went online, I think, which is very interesting, because in the entrepreneurial world, a lot of people were selling online. A lot of women, for instance, who were getting their side hustles on and were always online selling, whether physical or service-based products. And then, when COVID happened, it seemed like suddenly the online space exploded. I know, for instance, on Etsy, one particular shop was selling masks, and I remember Etsy sending out an email saying that they had a pattern for masks, and they were encouraging people to start selling them because they weren't really necessary to begin with. And this particular shop, from the numbers I saw, they made a lot, like in the hundreds of thousands of dollars from, the last time I checked that shop. They were doing really well making these masks. I got a couple of them myself from the shop, which is how I found them on there. They did really well. They responded very quickly, and they got a lot of sales. And, my point is, a lot of people discovered that, there isn't an online space, and there's online stores. So for those people who have always been on there selling, this is not a new thing. It's always been that way. But then I found on the other side, there were a lot of people who seemed kind of surprised that you could buy so many things online. They were kind of used to the brick and mortar stores, and now this was kind of a new experience for them because they weren't used to that, to knowing you could buy all these things online. So I think that event, that awful event, that in a sense, COVID has not gone away, so I'm not going to say that's over, but it shifted a lot of things, and maybe that's also one of the reasons why this whole conversation about direct selling has moved to the forefront, maybe more than it was before, because now a lot more people seem to be aware that, you can buy a lot of things online, and it's very easy. With print on demand makes things much easier. That's very much a thing, a conversation on Etsy of print on demand products and those people who do the handmade products, and that's probably a conversation that's going to be going on for quite some time, I think. But I do see a lot of, particularly women, maybe women who are juggling children and work and school and all kinds of things, or people who are in school who have the side hustles, or whatever. It's across the board. I don't think there's any just one type of person who's selling online. It's very much an opportunity. And of course, content creators the rise of that going on right now. It's a different world of selling and retail than it may have been. And there's a lot of opportunity there. But again, when you're doing it yourself, there's also more responsibility. And if you already got a full plate, you may want to look at it and say, is this really what I want to take on right now? So, just putting that out there. Not to say that you must sell direct. No, I'm just saying it's an option. And it may be something you want to consider. And if you do want to consider it, that I'm presenting this information on the 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern, a webinar. And I hope that you will at least go and check it out if you'd like to join us. And find out for yourself if this is something that will work for you. Again, this is how authors can sell their books direct. And tickets are being sold on Eventbrite. So that's, if you check out Eventbrite before you look at the link in the show notes, then you can definitely look for that title and find it and get more information about what's going to be included in the webinar. So I think that's it for now. And I guess just another note, I said the webinar be made available afterwards for those people excuse me, who may have to miss it or end up missing it after they've bought their ticket. Okay, so before I go on and on and on and start rambling, let me just close this off right now. Thank you so much for joining me. Everything, all the links are going to be in the show notes. And as I mentioned before, I really want to be able to share a few more interviews with you that I haven't unfortunately gotten a chance to do because of other things have kind of came up, and it's just been a little tough to juggle the timing. To have other people. There's people who love to be on the show. I just haven't been able to set up times for interviews because of other things that have come up. But I'm hoping to be able to at least bring a few people on to interview them and talk about what they're doing and share that with you. So I'm really hoping that I'll be able to do that relatively soon. So, look out for that. But meantime, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you on the webinar, and I will talk to you again later. Bye-bye now.